Capitalism, socialism, and communism. Most people struggle to understand the difference between these words because whenever they try to learn, every other source uses fancy-ass words like privatization, oligopoly, dialectical materialism, and so on. But this is Dr. Gene, and today we're gonna learn about the difference between capitalism, socialism, and communism. Capitalism is the easiest to understand out of the bunch, and most people can distinguish it from the other two. Capitalism, in all simplicity, is that you get paid your salary, or whatever, then you use that money to buy whatever you need, whether it's shelter, food, education, healthcare, or whatever else. If we want a deeper understanding of capitalism, under this system, the government has very minimal involvement in the market prices, salaries, and so on. Factories and farms and businesses are owned by people and companies, and they hire whoever they feel appropriate for a salary they feel appropriate and sell their goods for a price determined by demand rather than the government, so the market is considered free. The positive side of this system is that it encourages people to get off their ass and work, as there is truly no limit to how much you can earn. This encourages invention and economic growth due to competition and the potential rewards. Basically, if there are 10 people who own 10 bakeries, each one of them will try to make the best bread possible at the lowest price to bring more customers than their competition, which benefits the guy who buys bread. The negative side, however, is that the government basically doesn't give a single flying fuck if you starve to death on a curb. Food, healthcare, and education are not provided by the government. You should buy them on your own, which is very bad for those who come from underprivileged families. Basically, in these systems, if your dad decided to be a degenerate fuck in his 20s and 30s, you're fucked. A good example of a capitalist country is the United States of America, especially Republican states like Texas. If capitalism and communism fucked behind a McDonald's and had a baby, that would be socialism. Socialism on a simple level is the idea that the market is still kind of free. But there are certain policies like high taxes that would make it possible for the government to provide certain services like healthcare, education, and sometimes food and shelter for free. Factories and stores, for example, are owned by people and companies, but certain establishments like universities, hospitals, and transport infrastructure are owned by the government, so the market is still free, but not to a cruel level. So imagine your salary is $3,000. Under a capitalist system, you would keep around $2,950, but under a socialist system, you would bring home only $1,000. However, if a car hits you on your way back, the government would take care of your hospital bill. Capitalism is basically gambling in comparison to socialism. The positive side of this is that it gives you a certain degree of freedom and no limit to how much you can earn and own. However, the negative side is that taxes are generally higher than in capitalist countries and prices may be higher in relation to salaries, but this isn't always the case. Some socialist countries, surprisingly, are France, Germany, and Canada. Yes, Canada, and most of Europe and the world are socialist systems. Communism is quite straightforward. Under a communist system, factories, farms, hospitals, business stores, even your butthole is owned by the government. The government basically owns everything and divides salaries, supposedly equally, to ensure there is no rich and poor. This is of course rarely, if ever, executed properly, as most communist systems suffer corruption, meaning the people are equal in being broke, while the leaders still enjoy a lavish lifestyle. To put it in simple terms, imagine if your father asked you and your brother to move 50 chairs from point 1 to point 2, and he'll give you $20. You moved 35 chairs, while your lazy-ass brother only moved 15. Your father then gives each one of you $10. You did more than twice as much work and still got paid the same as your brother in the name of equality. Of course, if you try to make this argument to your father, he'll beat your ass and call you a spoiled brat, just like the leader of a communist state would most likely call you a threat to the people. The positive side of this system is that basic needs like healthcare, education, and transport are provided by the government. Also, theoretically, it's impossible to be poor under this system. However, the negative side is that there's no real point for putting in that extra work, and there's no real point of innovation, as you'll end up just like the loser who does nothing. Of course, you better hope your leader doesn't turn into an evil fuck, otherwise you'll be as fucked as a broke dude in a capitalist state. Most communist states are gone today, but a good example is North Korea. In the past there was the USSR, which isn't truly communist, but probably the closest humanity ever got to creating a communist state. So I hope you guys now have a good understanding of the difference between capitalism, socialism, and communism. And if you don't, not gonna lie man, you're kinda stupid as fuck. This video was hard to make, so I'd really appreciate it if you like, subscribe, and share it with a dumbass friend of yours. Thanks for watching.